That's where we're getting inauthentic politicians who people don't trust. Mm-hmm. And they're actually the reason why people quite like Nigel Farage. I say this as a conservative, is because he's considered to be authentic and he enjoys the luxuries of the cigars and the nice sort of, tweed suits and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
A few years ago, Bernard Arnault was the richest man in the world.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. You've got to think about that. He didn't invent, the microchip or social media. He sells handbags.
Yes.
And after dinner liqueurs.
Yes.
When I was had the joys of doing some of the Brexit discussions and negotiations for the Home Office out in Brussels, the evening would always end with a discussion over a glass of Scottish whisky.
Getting people drunk.
I know you've got some great whiskies up there, but I went to Japan to sign a trade deal, and I was actually completely crushed by the Japanese trade industry. I mean, I've never been so beaten in a whiskey drinking competition in my life. Our ambassador, I think, still recovering.
Hello and welcome to The Luxury Dispatch, the podcast that plunges the cafetiere of curiosity and reveals the refined and the rare that makes up the luxury industry. I'm Tom Chamberlin, and today we shall be stepping into the world of politics, because luxury, for all its beauty and craftsmanship, does not exist in a vacuum. It lives in economies, in trade agreements, in tax codes, in diplomacy, and perhaps, more than anything, in the decisions made in corridors far from the shop floor. Then again, are politicians frightened of it? Is it a vote loser or can it be a campaign cornerstone? From heritage industries to global soft power, from regulation to reputation, the politics of luxury shapes not just what we buy, but what nations choose to protect, promote and project to the world. To explore that landscape, I'm joined by two men who know better than most how politics and industry entwine. Lord Dominic Johnson, former Trade Minister, Chairman of the Conservative Party and long-standing champion of British enterprise, and Sir Brandon Lewis, former Cabinet Secretary with deep experience at the heart of government. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much.
I thought about this as a germane topic because I remembered that a while ago it was Rory Stewart who was running for the London Mayor. And I messaged somebody who I knew was on his team and said, look, I think it would be really great if Rory could come down to Savile Row to meet the tailors and to understand the issues that they face, because it's not an issue of consumer interest. It is an issue of things like rent, VAT, business rates, all that kind of stuff. And the response I got was basically, it's a bad look. I would love to be able to, among other things, explore this. So start with the idea that luxury, to some extent, in the eyes of politicians, has this sort of mark of Cain on it. Can we explore that and dissect what you think that might be behind that?
I think it's disappointing, actually. Savile Row is one of those quintessentially British things that's known around the world. It should be a sales pitch, but I think what you saw, what you found with Rory not going is a symptom of one of the things I saw a few times in various roles I had when I was in government, is you become very conscious, and advisors and civil become very conscious of not looking in a way that's going to get criticism, and not looking too elitist. When in fact, actually, the artisanship, the skill set, the craftsmanship, the things like Savile Row, and there's other obviously sectors and areas around the UK that do this, but things like Savile Row should actually be the pinnacle of what great British exports. It's part of our soft power, but people they do run scared of it.
Lord Johnson. The luxury industry and politics, best of bedfellows or the twain shall never meet?
I mean, ultimately, people are aspirational, and also we want people to be authentic. And I think if you love luxury and beautiful things and things that are bespoke and made for you, or you've had an input in designing, I think it's very important to project that. And everything about this great nation is really about luxury, from the king on down, from Savile Row to Jermyn Street to Rolls-Royce to our Premier League. Everything we project is really the principle of aspiration and luxury. And that's our British culture. So for politicians to abrogate that, I think, is an enormous problem. And yes, Brandon's right. You've got two very well-dressed, luxurious politicians here, current and former, and still to be. And actually, people love the fact when politicians, espouse Britain, espouse luxury, look good. We remember Margaret Thatcher's handbag, Anthony Eden's suits. In fact, Tony Blair, interestingly, was probably the last prime minister who actually embraced the principle of what we export in terms of luxury Britishness.
I mean, I definitely think that if a politician showed up today looking like Anthony Eden, it would be a real talking point. I mean, ultimately, to some extent, what we're talking about is PR, isn't it?
Yeah.
The problem with politicians and PR, there's sort of a sensitivity around it.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people conflate luxury and quality with flash. Flash doesn't work. And as Dominic said, if you're authentic and you're wearing something that's quality, actually, I think we should be proud of that. You and I both know Gaziano and Girling, Dean, their product, Northamptonshire, is world renowned for the quality of shoes that come from the UK.
Yeah.
Savile Row is world renowned for the quality of tailoring. These are all parts of the UK's soft power, and actually we should be doing more to support it. And I think sometimes we, as I say, I think people in politics get wary about the press being negative about what they do. And I think if you're flash, absolutely, and that's not appropriate. But quality is a different thing. And I've seen it. I mean, I'll name somebody because it was in the public domain, and I thought it was really unfair. Was a colleague of mine, Gillian Keegan, great member of Parliament, great lady, did a TV interview, and the reporting afterwards wasn't about her interview; it's about the watch she was wearing.
Right.
She was a very successful businesswoman before, self-made, had a very nice watch on, and that's what the media focused on, and that is what makes people nervous.
But I think that I mean, that's all that's wrong with the world today. That's why we're getting inauthentic politicians who people don't trust. And actually the reason why people quite like Nigel Farage, I say this as a conservative, is because he's considered to be authentic and he enjoys the luxuries of the cigars and the nice sort of, tweed suits and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And I took a school round Parliament the other day, and I gave them an hour-long tour, and I fascinated them with historical dates, the Glorious Revolution, the history of the Palace of Westminster. And they all were in complete silence, really, for the entire hour, and started looking off at the middle distance. And at the end, I said, any questions? And one of the kids put his hand up and said, yes, is that a Rolex? And I was wearing it, and that was the only thing they were interested in. I realised that actually they want, you want your politicians, you want your political leaders to look good and also reflect their own authentic self, which is that we aspire to nice things and comfort. And actually that's the job of a politician, is to give people longer, happier, more comfortable, wealthier lives. And by pretending somehow that I'm down with the kids, I'm being inauthentic, I'm breaching trust with the population. And also I'm not doing my job, which is supposedly to make everyone richer and happier.
So you said that this is a problem with the world. Do you think that this is actually more of a problem with British politics?
Yeah, I do. Because
Yes.
if you look around the world, the US is a good example. In the US system exudes power.
Yeah.
I always remember once, a long time ago, being in a restaurant in London, and Duke of Cambridge and Duchess were in there having dinner in a relatively private sort of space. Nobody would have known they were there. The protection's very discreet.
Yeah.
I had protection for a while. In the UK, we're very discreet about it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't necessarily know. And nobody in that restaurant knew who was just sitting around the back of the restaurant at all. During the meal, a couple of guys walked in, very tall guys in very dark suits, looking something like the Men in Black film, but with the sort of mouthpiece here and an earpiece in, talking to each other and I think that it was really odd because we don't do that in the UK. And then 5 minutes later, vroom, 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 that road full of great big cars, and in came at the time Secretary Kelly.
Okay.
This is a while ago. And it just made me think, we've got the future heir to the throne here. Nobody knows they're here. And American politicians come in and the world knows they're here. They exude power in that way. And it's very authentic for them as Americans. Now, I'm not suggesting we should be quite like that, but there's a balance in between. And, we were saying earlier, a few minutes ago, and my advisors would always say to me before I went on the interview, take your watch off.
Yeah.
Just because you just don't want, that's not what you want the folks to be. If somebody catches what you're wearing, whether it's a good watch or a bad watch or anything, we are, I think it's a very British thing about, we like to keep we like to be a bit more humble, but actually that shouldn't stop us from promoting something that is quintessentially British, that is high quality and actually a really important industry for the UK.
Yes. I think the optics of success are very different. I mean, the cabinet currently in America is, billion after billion after billion, which just could not happen currently in British politics.
Somebody said to me a while ago, that was an interesting take, because of the history of the UK, and when we were an empire and then we stepped back from that, we're a bit embarrassed about what we are and our past success. So we are more reticent about what we do. And even if you look within the UK, St. Patrick's Day is a big event, St. David's Day, all of it. We don't celebrate St. George's Day in quite the same way. We're a bit more conservative about it with a small c. But you do see other countries around the world where their politicians will be much less worried about wearing luxury goods and highlighting that. I spent a lot of time in the UAE. Ministers there are successful, smart people in their own right, and they will wear what they want to wear. You want good people doing these roles. And actually, one of the things I think, again, in the UK, it's not just UK produced products, but I think the luxury market in the UK, people used to come from around the world, not just for Savile Row, but even non-English brands that happen to have depart shops and facilities in the UK, they'd come here to visit them. It was a real centre, and we're losing some of that, partly because of the tax system, and that's where politics has a real impact. You've only got to see the impact in London on sales of things following the change to VAT and duty-free shopping, let alone where business rates are, has a big impact. So politics has a real impact on the luxury market.
I'll definitely come on to the VAT stuff in a sec, but I wanted to just pick on something you were saying earlier about the rest of the world, because Milad, you have done huge trade deals across the world when you were trade minister. Tell me more about, when you go abroad, how brand Britain includes its luxury industry and how people see it and look up to it and admire it for what we have.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'm not a High Court judge, so you don't need to call me Milad. I think, Lord Johnson, my Lord, or Dominic. I mean, a luxury name like Dominic is fine. I mean, I think
or just Geezer Johnson.
Brandon's comment about not being told to wear his watch when he went into an interview is actually really interesting. I mean, my officials were wonderfully supportive of who I wanted to be and how I wanted to project myself. And they encouraged me to wear basically English tailoring. Everything I'm wearing now, from my pants outward, is made, in this great nation. From the shoes, the tie, the Emma Willis tie, Welsh and Jeffreys, the shirt, and all the rest of it. Turnbull and Asser. This is important, and I saw myself bizarrely as a brand ambassador for the UK, by the way, because this is a UK-wide industry, including things like Scotch whisky and all the rest of it. I had to drink litres of when I was abroad.
Marvellous.
Somebody has to.
Well, I had to. In fact, I was beaten by a Japanese trade minister.
I always worried about how you would cope. I'm glad you were sustained.
I'm not a great whiskey drinker. I know you've got some great whiskies up there, but I went to Japan to sign a trade deal, and I was actually completely crushed by the Japanese trade minister. I mean, I've never been so beaten in a whiskey drinking competition in my life. Our ambassador, I think, still recovering. But I used to make a point of projecting the whole principle of Britishness. And what I loved about it is, everywhere I went around the world, whenever I went into a room to get investment for the UK, we were 15 love up. And what I find distressing was that the government basically did everything it could to put us 15 love down. And I would go and see people whose children have been at school here. By the way, education is a luxury export, but the private schools system,
very much so.
And our universities, which are incredible, who'd had property in London. I mean, all the Gulf state politicians, all the politicians in Asia, they all have properties in the UK. And that just gave me an enormous advantage. And I always got frustrated that things like VAT on shopping and other issues that we'd have, I don't know, even visas for people who wanted to come to London to shop and spend and participate in our luxury industries, were all made more complicated. And I thought that was very irritating, because we have everything here and people want it. I didn't have to sell. The door was open when I arrived in the room, and the point was we should be pushing it wider open, not trying to close it.
And can you explain the VAT change?
Yeah,
what
sure. And look, just before we do the VAT, I just want to build on that soft power point Dominic made. And it is a really important thing, because when I was in the Home Office, I had responsibility for Europol and Interpol. And Europol at the time was led by a Brit, Rob Wainwright, great guy. And at Europol, every country would do an event during the course of the year. And I remember them sort of saying to me, the most popular one of the year was the one that the UK held.
Really?
And that was because Rob's second in command was a Scot, and he would speak to some of the Scottish whiskies. So it was basically a whiskey tasting evening. Everybody came to that, and it was a real, and that's a real exusion of using our soft power by using British products. And the whiskey industry is, I think, Diageo is the.
Whiskey is our biggest agricultural export.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It's incredible.
So Diageo is exporting, almost a monopoly on the whiskey industry. You've got these great products going around the world, and we use that for soft power. And when I was had the joys of doing some of the Brexit discussions and negotiations for the Home Office out in Brussels, the evening would always end with a discussion over a glass of Scottish whiskey,
getting people drunk.
Later on in my career, when I was in Northern Ireland, obviously it was Bushmills, which is superb. But the whole range of these things we use, I'm wearing an English-made suit by a great tailor, Chris Kerr. He produces a lot of the suits and materials for some of the world's leading men in the biggest movie stars in the world.
Yeah.
And he goes out to LA, and that's again, our British tailoring is tailoring international stars in movies around the world, and it's an important industry. And then that also, encourages people to come to the UK, and as you were saying, shopping. And the problem with the VAT issue is, and the duty-free shopping particularly, when we took away duty-free shopping, it meant the visitors who used to come to the UK, whether it was from the East or from the US, would come to the UK, they come to London, stay in great hotels, eat in great restaurants, go around the shops and spend a lot of money. The government benefits from some tax on that money, obviously VAT, etc. And then they go home. The difference, once the duty came in, is they can come to London. They might do a bit of sightseeing. They'll still go to some of the greatest restaurants in the world, which is also a luxury thing that we're renowned for. Some of the best hotels in the world. But then they'll window shop.
Yeah.
And then instead of staying in the UK for a week or whatever, they'll go to Paris or Rome for a couple of nights, Milan, do the shopping there because they're getting 20, 25% less. No matter how much money you've got, you're spending more. 20% of that is a lot of money.
Yeah.
So the spend has moved. So the UK has lost out on that. And gradually, they spend more time in Paris, Milan, or wherever it is to do their shopping. Well, that's where they're going to go. We lose out. So I think, for example, last year in London, I saw some figures where footfall was up, but spend was dramatically down. And that's the problem.
And forgive me, isn't that a fairly easy fix? And if so, why hasn't it been done?
So Rishi brought it in as Chancellor. When Liz Truss came in as Prime Minister, Liz and Kwasi put it back. And then when Rishi became Prime Minister, he took it out again.
So it's Rishi's fault.
Yeah, it's Rishi.
Yes,
It
was a great example of politicians not understanding how people want to live and not understanding the importance of the dynamic economy. And just to sort of jump to a slightly bigger topic, I'm very concerned that we have very few global fashion and luxury brands, actually. I mean, Burberry's probably the only one that could be on a par with sort of Louis Vuitton, whatever it is. We've got some fabulous second-sized businesses like Mulberry or Chamberlin or whatever it may be. We never really understood the importance of investing in our luxury industry. And it's not just about sort of nice things to wear or the brand Britain, but a few years ago, Bernard Arnault was the richest man in the world. Yeah. And that's incredible. You've got to think about that. He didn't invent, the microchip or social media. He sells handbags.
Yes.
And after dinner liqueurs.
Yes.
He's the richest man in the world. And that says how important the luxury industry is and how important it could be to the UK. What's frustrating is we have the crafts people here. But many of these European luxury brands, they're either made outside the country in which they operate in, or they have sort of workforces brought in order to make their goods. So the idea of sort of traditional craftsmanship and stuff has been heavily diluted. I'm careful how I say that because that's not in all cases, but in many cases. Whereas in Britain, we make these things here. Yeah. And the specialization and quality is so far and above everywhere else in the world. I just find it frustrating that we don't have a government principle. The body politic, this is what we're talking about. Why aren't politicians proud to wear great Savile Row suits and beautiful English shoes and all the rest of it? Whereas at the same time, there's a bit of hypocrisy because there's been scandals over politicians receiving freebies, luxury goods on the side, but not being honest enough either to display them or own them themselves. And the last thing I want to say is that luxury doesn't need to be expensive. Your podcast is really about style. It's not about expensive things. It's about style, which obviously, high quality costs a bit more than mass production. But in terms of, authentic politicians buying things that are stylish and looking good, that's something that we need. And it's bizarre that we're so unconfident in our political classes to project that.
And you can, in some areas, you can see that other parts of the world, other countries, other businesses around the world understand the value of British quality. Hence why a couple of our, arguably in the country world, if you like, some of our biggest brands, British brands, aren't owned by, they're not British anymore.
No.
Great Purdy, fabulous brand, great craftsmanship,
Harrods,
great
Aspreys,
history, part of the Richemont Group.
Yeah.
Holland and Holland went to Chanel, now part of the Beretta Group.
Yeah.
These are great British brands that companies from other countries have recognised the value of. And they've kept them as British in the sense of its British skills, British craftsmanship. But, we should be prouder of that we're able to build and develop these brands ourselves. And actually, government should be supporting them because they are part of our soft power.
Because that's something I've seen you speak out on before, is the idea that the French and the Italians, they're big on it. I mean, I think in France, they are basically a protected species. If you're a tailor or a couturier in Paris, you basically get a much better deal than everybody else. And that's where I think politics and the luxury industry clash, certainly here in the UK, is that while the Italians and the French are very big to promote it and speak highly of it and be proud of it, in Britain it's the opposite. I think that if you are seen to talk it up, then you show yourself as being out of touch, and that is of course the kind of bête noire of all politicians, is being out of touch.
But actually you're in touch.
I agree.
That's my point.
That is also my point. And I think that is where the solution needs to be, is to find a kind of way of grinding past that, what feels like a sort of an entrenched attitude towards politicians being successful. And perhaps, as you say, Nigel Farage or movers like that is a symptom of that problem, is that I think there's a lot of people who feel the same way as us and wish that it was a bit more aspirational, wishes a bit more look forward to by looking backwards, looking at our heritage and looking at our skills and abilities to be able to create a sort of culture where the luxury industry has a place. And I think that culture is really important in the sense of, look at James Bond, for example, another great export of ours. But the whole character is created through his Savile Row suits, the whiskies he drinks, the wine that he has knowledge of, or the all these sorts of things, the cars he drives.
And as a character, is a great example, because if we're honest, there can't be many of us men, young guys, who at some point in your life hasn't thought, I'd love to be James Bond.
Yeah.
And it's not so much because, you might want to be a film star, but a lot of it is just that character, whether you've read the book, whether you've watched one of the films, what's been consistent through that character's life is they're always stylish.
That's good taste.
It looks smart.
Are you going to be the next James Bond? I think we were talking about James Bond the other day. Firstly, when I was in the government,
always sit under your bush.
I don't think that's the right phrase. I'm not sure
where
you're sitting. I think you're sitting beside me. I had Ian Fleming's office in the old Admiralty building, which was just the coolest thing ever. And true British government, I walked past it. It said the Fleming room. And it was a storage room for chairs and broken overhead projectors. I said, we've got to use the Fleming room. They didn't want me to use it. The whole idea of promoting it, and I want to have an Aston Martin outside, and have James Bond celebration. No one really supported me doing it. And I just thought, you're missing such an important trick here. The thing about James Bond, which is really interesting, people forget, which is why what we're talking about is so important politically in terms of sort of our nation's direction, is that the actors who played James Bond weren't toffs. Sean Connery was a Glasgow milkman, wasn't he? Whatever. I know Roger Moore had a raised eyebrow and all the rest of it, but Daniel Craig and so on, these are not, you may say public schoolboy types. And that's actually quite important, because these actors are becoming, aspirational characters with all their style and suits and Dom Perignon and all that sort of stuff. That's, for me, a very important element of James Bond that people forget about, which is everyone can have that style. And these aspirational characters played by people who have achieved aspiration.
And Fleming himself was a very interesting character in the sense that he had great taste, but he would sort of plug these brands unnecessarily. I mean, he would just drop in Floris or
before you were paid to do such things.
Yes, exactly. Because I think he probably saw that there was a purpose in doing that, and it was a good thing to do. And actually, funnily enough, one of the things he did when he was in naval intelligence was, whilst there were Nazi officers, when they were captured, who were sort of taken to a place in the countryside, and all sorts of ghastly things happened to them, he decided that it was much more of an in vino veritas approach, and he would take them out to Simpsons on the Strand and get them drunk and take them to Savile Row and have a soup made, and they were like, "Oh, this is rather nice."
And spilled all the beans. Much easier than cracking the Enigma code.
Savile Row, I think, has saved a lot of lives because of Ian Fleming.
I'm not surprised about that.
So you were saying about how much this is worth to the nation. I think you're right. I know internationally it's a $1.5 trillion industry, which, that is not small fry. And as you mentioned, you got Bernard Arnault, who was the richest man in the world at one point, but then also the people who own Kering, Richemont, LVMH is not a one-off. No. This is a huge thing.
And it goes very, very wide and deep. And when we talk about luxury, particularly in the sense of quality time and quality life and promoting Britishness and exports around the world, you've got everything. You've got all the products that Diageo do. It's not just, as we were talking about, Savile Row, Jermyn Street. Through those industries, the high-end shops, the restaurants, the hotels, all of these quality, what we call luxury products, the number of employees and the supply lines to those, because they don't live in a vacuum on their own.
Because it's about 500,000 people who are
about 500,000 people, pretty much directly. If you then take in the indirect employment that goes with that, it is a huge industry. Arguably, the whole hospitality industry is part of our luxury industry. It's that luxury of time. You are talking very, very big numbers, and a very, very key part of what makes the UK, and what people buy into the UK around the world. So we should be much more upfront about this is something we are proud of, and it's absolutely at the heart of our soft power internationally as well.
And it makes us a lot of money and employs lots of people.
We say
it's not a nice to have.
This is 80 billion.
Yeah, I think it's actually 80 billion.
Yeah.
But that isn't. As Brandon says, that's just directly in people who are making
that's
suits
actually,
and ties and shoes and all the rest of it. It's enormous. So to think of it in an embarrassed way as sort of something over here for sort of foreign tourists is totally wrong.
Yeah.
It's an integral component of our economy. And if, again, looking to the future, that's where people are going to want to spend money, and that's where we can compete. And so as a business person, that's where you should invest.
Not only compete, this is where we lead.
Well, precisely. But I mean, it's our owned area,
Yes.
and it should be much bigger.
Yeah. Stuff the French, we can beat them.
Well, we always have in the past.
Yes, quite. Now, if you travel with any regularity, and I suspect quite a few of you listening do, you'll know the slightly irritating ritual that happens every time you land somewhere new. The plane touches down, you switch your phone off airplane mode, and within about 5 seconds, your mobile provider politely informs you that using your mobile phone will now cost roughly the GDP of a small island nation. This is where Savile comes in. Savile is an eSIM app that gives you instant internet access when you arrive in a new country without having to hunt down a local SIM card or rely on whatever questionable Wi-Fi happens to be floating around at the airport. You simply install it before you travel, choose a data plan for your destination, as I did when recently flying to Los Angeles, and when you land, you're online immediately. It also comes with built-in security features like web protection and ad blocking, so you're browsing on a safer connection rather than relying on the occasionally dubious public networks you find in airports or hotels. In short, it's a rather elegant way to stay connected while traveling without the roaming fees. Download Savile in the App Store or by scanning the QR code on screen. Use code DISPATCH at checkout to get 15% off your first purchase. The details are in the podcast episode description box. Let's also talk about the way that politics, we've spoken about VAT, but the way politics is getting in the way of the luxury industry in the sense of allowing it to kind of flourish. Because I mentioned earlier, business rates, rent, the way in which London has become very expensive for these places to operate. And yet it's only feasible for them because no wealthy sort of person from the UAE is going to go out to Gloucestershire to visit Emma's shirt factory. They want to get the shirts here in London. They don't want to go and pick their tweed up in.
But can I come in on that a brief moment? Because actually, a lot of people do come and go to Bicester Village, and they didn't even go into London. They get the coach from Heathrow and go straight up and do their discount shopping. And one of the things I tried to get going was an atelier cluster, like a Bicester Village, but for bespoke, artisanal, quality luxury goods made by UK companies, and do partnership with maybe one of the great French houses like Chanel or whatever, who, by the way, are headquartered in London, not in Paris. It's a good example of why people want to be here. So those are the sorts of things that can actually happen that could be very powerful. And then you would get people flying in from the Gulf and going straight off to wherever it could be in Northamptonshire, where they would have an amazing cluster. And it's through clustering you get these quality outcomes, because you get the expertise and the skills that get developed, which we're very bad at developing.
Yeah, and actually it's a good example. So I know in Northampton, I remember seeing sometimes visitors will come to the UK and can do a tour of the key shoe manufacturers in Northampton. It is a thing you can do. Yeah. The flip side, though, and this comes back to the duty-free shopping VAT issue, is I was with, not that long ago, somebody who's involved with the Bicester Village group, who was saying to me that Bicester Village here had been the number one in the world. It was their best sales, best profits. It's now dropped to bottom.
Because of the VAT on tourist shopping.
Because it's changed tourists coming. They're not coming in the same way they were. They're now going, I think it's the Italian one now is the number one. And that's purely on the duty change.
And this is what I'm saying, is that it's unlikely that this government is going to be particularly sympathetic towards VAT changes for the luxury industry's benefit.
Yeah, if I asked, I collared the Chancellor. The only time I had a conversation with her was I said, why don't you take VAT off tourist shopping? And she was like, no, we're not looking at that sort of thing. And she got frankly cross. And I think that's a mistake to take that view, because really you should be looking at every opportunity to create employment. And if you think of AI, okay, it's going to be big, and it's going to disintermediate everyone. It's going to be problematic for so many industries. But actually, the one industry that will be left unquestionably is the concept of high-end quality, bespoke, human input, handmade, not computer-made, automated. That's the whole point. This lovely suit I'm wearing is going to be the luxury that people will aspire to more and more. Yeah. And with hopefully more resources, because technology will make our lives easier and cheaper. It's going to get bigger and bigger.
And the other thing with luxury is actually that very point will be the human contact. as AI develops and does more and more for us, people, particularly people at the high end, what they're going to crave is experience.
Yes.
They're going to crave human interaction and experience. And what these luxury goods tend to have in common, particularly bespoke goods, is you've got to have human interaction.
Yeah.
There's a human being involved in the craftsmanship, in talking to you about what you need and developing it. And that experiential side of it is going to be valuable. And again, we have a real opportunity in the UK to be world leaders in this because we have the reputation and we've got the skill sets and the craftsmen to do it.
Yeah, I was speaking to Mo in a previous episode about this.
I saw that.
He was saying that ultimately AI can't quite do the designs yet that he can design. And when I sort of pointed that out, that's an interesting point, that there's some longevity in that. He said, but also crucially, AI can't apply tattoos to people.
Yeah. Well, at some point though, I don't really want to check myself. I haven't got a tattoo yet.
No.
But it's just a question of time. But as Brandon says, the experience of going and having a suit made, talking to tailor, that's the whole point. Is I shop a lot online, and we're always on Amazon buying stuff. That's great, well done, fabulous. But it's the experience principle. I mean, and the bespokeness to you through the dialogue that you have, and people are judged really by what they consume. Actually, how you look, how you dress, what you spend your money on, and all that sort of stuff. And so that experience of consuming is sort of one of the things that really defines a person. And that's why the luxury industry is so fascinating and so seductive, because that principle of having something designed for you. And I always remember my great-grandfather made quite a lot of money out of the Industrial Revolution. And he used to buy Rolls Royces in pairs. And the one soft top, whatever it is, and one hard top, and the driver's seats would be bespoke to him.
Yes,
which is a wonderful thing, which you don't do anymore. Also a bit bizarre, since he probably has someone to drive him around. But just that whole principle of that creation of a car solely for you, just makes me feel sort of warm and cozy.
Yes.
And it's a great thing.
But it's the capacity to
I
tell
haven't
a
got
story.
my Rolls Royces in pairs anymore. We've had to make cutbacks, sadly.
But it's the aspect of storytelling, isn't it? And
Quite.
The other thing that you stood up in the House of Lords and made protestations.
One of the great speeches of our time.
One of the great speeches of our time.
I'm glad
I advise
people think so.
all listeners, viewers, to look this up. It was in defense of cigars.
Yes, it was.
Actually,
And we got another debate this afternoon.
Dominic will speak to this, but if you look at that speech, it is what I thought was so great about that. Apart from exactly, it was a great exposition on quality of life.
Yes.
Having that power to make a personal decision about how you spend your time and how you interact with others. And that's why it was so powerful. It was a brilliant speech. I said it to everybody I could
Thank you.
think of,
We need to. We're abrogating our liberties, and actually this sort of political class attack on luxury and freedom of choice and how you define yourself is at the core of, I think, people's dissatisfaction with the political establishment at the moment.
Yeah.
This idea that you should live like this, you shouldn't make these sorts of choices. And freedom is about making bad choices as well as good choices.
Absolutely. And to just tee you up on the speech was ultimately, there is legislation going through that is largely focused on vapes, cigarettes, et cetera. But what's going to take a hit is the capacity for people to go to these perfectly legal, currently, sampling lounges and cigar shops to sample cigars and enjoy them in the company of other people.
Yeah.
And currently, if you open a club or a hotel in central London, you would be mad to not have one of these, because they are incredibly popular places for people. Because whether it's a special occasion or whether you're sort of more regular enthusiast with cigars, people flock to these places in a way that they don't to whiskey bars.
Yep.
If you set up a whiskey bar, that's actually quite challenging to keep going. But something like a cigar or sampling lounge, people just fill them constantly.
The hotels, I mean, the one on the peninsula, these ones in five-star hotels.
Or the Emery.
Exactly. They're fabulous places, and they drive a huge amount of business. But I was very intrigued in researching for this speech. I went to talk to Fox's and Davidoff's, for example, two phenomenal stores. And they said tourists come in who don't smoke, who've never smoked a cigar in their lives, but they've read about and seen these shops, and they want to experience meeting the Sahakians or the staff at the counter at Fox's. I mean, that's amazing. The driver of tourism for these sort of cultural institutions is so important. You touched on a good point, which is, a cigar for me is a way to spend time, either in personal, private contemplation in a world of mayhem, or in the company of my friends. And I've got this cigar club in the village where I live in Wiltshire, which has just sort of grown and grown. And we've got our annual dinner this this Friday. And it sounds a bit ridiculous, but there are very few other things that you can do like that allow people to come together and talk in an environment like that. And I think, again, if you think of the post-AI age, what are we going to want to do more of? Have contemplative, pleasurable time with our friends in an environment that allows us to relax and enjoy life. And life's short, and the idea that we should ban these shops and cigars for future generations in a sensible way of people enjoying them, to me, strikes at the heart of the liberty of an Englishman.
Yeah, quite right, for Mercy. Another terrific speech. But crucially, on top of that, it's the problem it comes up against is this real reflex response of "oh, poor you," small violin stuff, which is part of the reason why you ended up on a bus on Park Lane.
Well, hang on, that was something slightly different.
But it's not. It is similar.
Well, there is because we were talking. we were talking. Brandon and I about our sort of experiences of being a government minister, and he's told to take his watch off, and everything, all your travel expenses are cut. So everyone thinks government ministers fly around the world for first class Concorde and stuff. That's not the case. I mean, I flew economy more often, but not, which is fine. I'm there to do business on behalf of my country.
Economy.
Yeah, it was an internal flight in India. And when you land as a minister on the plane in a country, they often send a group of armed guards on to take you off. It's all well and cool. It's fine if you're in sort of seat 1A.
I just assume that was how you were treated.
No, that's only when I'm being arrested for sort of being drunk on for rage.
In Japan.
But it was interesting. So I could see the sort of the two soldiers with machine guns and a chap in a peak cap behind, starting at the front of the plane. But I was literally the back seat, in between two sort of random people, and they were looking at me as the guards came closer and closer. Eventually, they stopped here, and the man went, "It's him." And the person next to me went, "You're being arrested, mate." I said, "Actually, I'm a VIP visitor." It didn't quite have the same, projection of Britain as a global superpower.
Right. He's mad.
And then the other time I loved was that we did a big sort of summit in the Lanesborough Hotel with some Saudis investing in the UK. Again, another country wanting to invest in this country, loving the cigar lounges, loving hotels like the Lanesborough. And we got rid of my car for budgetary constraints. So a lot of ministers didn't have cars. I shared one with sort of 5 other ministers. And so I come out and the Saudi minister says, "Would you like a lift back to your house in my car?" And I said, "No, it's fine, I've got a car." I basically had to lie. I was too embarrassed to say we don't have one, we can't afford it. So he went back in, and I saw the bus stopped outside Lanesborough. So I got on it because it goes to my house. And so I sat there with my case, at which point the delegation came out of the Lanesborough and saw me sitting sort of with the window here on a bus going home. And they must have thought, Britain, what the hell's happened to rule Britannia?
Quite.
But unnecessary sort of penny pinching. That made us feel good that we weren't spending the public money, but actually we spend trillions of pounds terribly.
Yes,
and a proper car, to take a minister out from a meeting like that, frankly, would have paid for itself.
So is it penny pinching, or is it again back to the whole PR
it's trying
thing?
to pretend that we all hitchhike to work and stuff. It's total rubbish.
A lot of it goes back when we first came into the context. When we came back into government in 2010, because of the financial crash, there was this push to reduce government expenditure.
Yeah.
And I think the view, and I was a backbencher for the first couple of years of that, but I remember the view at the time from sort of number 10 and the team was, if we're going to be reducing spend on a range of public area things, then the government's got to show it's doing its thing. So one of the things David Cameron did was he cut ministerial pay, which got cut and never got reintroduced. They reduced the government car service, all of these things. But some of it, the idea was presentation that the government's cutting its cloth as well, and quite rightly. I worked in a department. We reduced our department by about 40% in that period, improved our output. I would argue with a good team, but then you get the flip side of that. And I can remember going down. I think I was the first government minister after 2010 when I came into as a minister to privatise something at a profit. And I privatised the Fire Service College, which was down in the southwest, Walsall-on-the-Naze. And I can remember going down there when we were doing the deal to do it. And the decision was we were going on the train. You go standard class, obviously, because you government car. We haven't got access to one to go all that way, and you don't go first class.
You didn't take a fire engine.
No, no. I did ask them to drive one all the way with the lights. Yeah, but of course that meant for 3 whatever it was hours on a train, you can't do any work.
Yeah,
because it's all commercially sensitive information. So you basically you lose 6 hours of work.
Yeah.
So as Dominic said, it can be counterproductive. But again, you also with some of these things, and actually Dominic's point around the time and the smoking discussions going on at the moment, I think plays into luxury as well, because one of the best luxuries we have is not about expenditure, it's time.
Yeah.
And the thing with something like whether it's smoking
Nice
or
point.
being able to spend is that time you can spend with friends, with colleagues, whether it's relaxing, discussing it. Luxury isn't necessarily about what you spend. Quality is sometimes about quality of life, and that's about time. Or in a product, it doesn't have to be an expensive product. It's just a product that you value, that's got craftsmanship to it, that is good for the UK.
That's the point. I just wanted to follow on one point about the government. So one of the things that annoyed me the most, and I saw it firsthand, and it's classic about how wrong politics is about the principle of luxury, brand, and British projection, was we sold off our embassies. So the most powerful thing literally in the world are places like the embassy in Tokyo and the embassy in Paris, and going there as a minister and doing a reception there. I mean, that makes money, and businesses always said the most useful thing often they had was the ambassador's reception, where they would meet purchasers in the countries they're trying to do business in. But we kept selling them off and moving to sort of flats above a newsagents and near the airport and stuff, and it just drove me around the bend. That for a small upfront sort of few million quid for selling the property, you would lose hundreds of years of brand power. And what I noticed, and we did this in Bangkok, we sold this incredible embassy and moved to an apartment, a nondescript apartment, perfectly nice, but totally pointless compared to the projection, is how many of the Thai politicians said to me, we're actually quite offended that you've deserted this wonderful building to move to a flat. What does it say about your view of us?
Yes, I think
so.
That's absolutely
The
right.
backfiring of trying to be sort of down with the kids and penny pinching and cost cutting and all that sort of stuff and vanilla is significant. It costs us money not to focus on the principles of the luxury projection of this great nation.
I want to come back after Dominic's had the tattoo and just see the quality of the luxury of Dominic's tattoo with Mo.
Well, it'd be for
I
Mo
think we should set
Coppoletto,
Dominic
so
with Mo,
it'd be marvellous.
I
You
love
could
that
have your
because I love
family crest.
monogramming and branding and
Yeah, you
stuff.
should have
Everything
it,
on my
yeah.
wallets and everything have got crests on them. Since I'm going into the House of Lords, the House of Lords actually is a great luxury.
The House of Lords is a great luxury.
great luxury brand. I mean, that might be the wrong word because it's not a. I mean, it's a luxury to have such an amazing institution in this country. But the principle of the House of Lords is always something that, again, we don't project enough. We're a bit embarrassed about the House of Lords. And dare I say it, the principle of hereditary peers, who sadly we are ending in a few months'
They're
time.
the most democratic part.
They are. They're the only people elected to the House of
elect-
Lords. They also work the hardest. They do all the work, and they have
It's
a
a real
sense.
loss,
We're slightly, but the principle of the hereditary peer is also a massive projection of Britishness, and to think that it's sort of a good idea to get rid of them for lots of different reasons, but actually for the principle of that in itself is something I've been thinking about.
No, I quite agree. And I think going back to your point about the luxury of time, I think what people have been saying is that brands and so forth, what everyone's targeting is headspace because there's so little of it nowadays. And fortunately, people are sensible enough to listen to the Luxury Dispatch every now and again when they have some headspace.
They should.
They should.
Absolutely.
Quite right. But the point is that we don't have a world anymore where, the capacity to sort of sit down and read a book for an hour or so, or pass the weekend or whatever, everybody's too busy. And so having those moments, I think, is that much more important. One other thing I wanted to touch on was you had a stint as Lord Chancellor.
Yes.
A great office.
Yes, but at a very particular time in our nation's history. So speaking of history, you witnessed it. You were at the very centre of it because, do I get it right that the Lord Chancellor is the person who makes the monarch at the time of the accession?
More arguably, for some, more importantly, I made Dominic appear.
Yes, you did.
Well, that was a huge move. That's very
I would like
important.
I would like to think it ranks up there, but the succession.
Yeah, I can still remember
was
I was in my
probably-
office in the MOJ and the Lord Chancellor signs the certificates or for peers, and Dominic's one came in. I took great pleasure in signing it with a very nice pen and sending you a photo, if I remember.
Well,
correctly.
thank you. That was
so
the-
to say, look, it really
done.
is. I'm debating whether to just put the ink on, but no, I had this very surreal and very special experience of I was the Lord Chancellor for the accession meeting. Again, a really good example of the world was fascinating because this is something, the accession had never been on TV before because obviously when Her Majesty had come in, it was pre live TV and things like that. So
Much missed, Majesty.
Much missed. And it was a heartbreaking period, a surreal experience. So we had the accession meeting. It's in two parts, and as Lord Chancellor, I was the member of the government who had to sign the paperwork for His Majesty. But one of the things that has always stuck with me, and I hadn't given a lot of thought to beforehand, was we had been planning in one way or another for that sad occurrence in the sense of losing Her Majesty as a country for actually a very long time. The security arrangements, they don't happen overnight. You know, for many, many years, ministers, civil servants have put a lot of time and effort, because the reality is that the funeral, we had, I think, more world leaders in the UK than pretty much at any point for decades. So it's a big security effort. And I've spent a few years both in the local government department and the Home Office in various meetings over 10 years. And even people in the previous Labour government under Tony Blair would have had some of those meetings, just because you've got to be prepared for these things. So I was quite surprised when at the accession meeting, we signed the documents, and I just would have assumed with all those years of preparation that somebody would have spoken to a great British pen-making brand, Conway Stewart, Yarder, led somebody to produce half a dozen pens that the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Lord Chancellor, the Archbishop of York, the Queen and the now Prince of Wales, the then Duke of Cambridge, obviously, were going to use, and then the King himself, obviously. But no, because you think that they eventually will go to a museum or to a charity or something, but no. So when we get there, the pens we are given to use were big disposable fountain pens. And if anybody goes on YouTube,
this is the equivalent of him showing up or leaving a meeting in a bus, isn't it?
And if anybody wants to go on YouTube and do a little search of the accession meeting, apart from seeing me sign the documents, what they will also see is His Majesty quite rightly had a view about the quality of the pens and decided to use his own pen that I think was a gift from Prince William. A beautiful pen, and he used a proper pen. But yeah, we were given big disposable fountain pens, which I just thought was, I mean, in one way, absolutely quintessentially British.
Yeah.
But in another way, a really wasted opportunity to have a great English pen maker do something that would be there in perpetuity.
With the eyes of the world upon you.
So I think I remember I had the opportunity to sign various trade treaties, and I did one in Downing Street. Again, it was a biro that snapped. And so then I had to get my own pen out, which had leaked. So the whole thing. And then,
so you were like the king then.
So that happened to the king in Hillsborough Castle.
Yes, it did. Well, yeah, not good.
No, but I'd never. What's it like? Because I'd just been, this was something, which is the first thing I did. Been put in the House of Lords where you change your name, so you sign differently, Johnson Lainston rather than Dominic Johnson. And so we get into Downing Street, Rishi Sunak standing there. I think the Crown Prince of Bahrain or whatever, and it's put in front of me, and I realised I'd never actually signed my name. And I found myself thinking, and I sort of couldn't, because it couldn't work. So imagine Rishi Sunak thinking, I've just appointed this guy as minister. He can't even write his own name. It's really starting to go downhill.
There is something in that. I must admit, even at the accession meeting, I just remember I've never been more conscious in my life about my signature looking smart.
Yeah,
because this document's there for 1,000 years. You know, one of the weird things in my family is my great-great-grandkids, that document is there without my signature on. So you suddenly become really conscious of
so where's the pen
right.
you got it on you? The pen you signed?
I haven't got it on me, but I have still got it.
We need to cut away to a photo of the pen.
Yes,
you've got to send a photo.
It's an iPhone shot
as well.
That's a great.
Selfie with the pen.
I think we need a pen.
We do need to cut away. Which I think brings us to discuss the solution to this. How do you see things improving as time goes on? What do you think needs to be done?
I don't think there's an easy, simple fix, because it's, and I think Dominic in the first couple of minutes made the point. I don't think it's the public don't want their politicians to look smart or support UK luxury products. I always had a view, if I was knocking on somebody's door in my constituency or anywhere, I think people want to see their members of parliament being smart and looking professional. So I was never a supporter of going out in Bermuda shorts and flip-flops and knocking on doors, which some people I know have done. I personally...
I didn't do that.
I don't know, you in a flip-flop. I came from, I lost a fair bit of weight at the back end of government. Because I was big, I always wanted to look relatively smart, and so I went and had suits made, because I was very self-conscious in that sense. But it also gave me an appreciation of the quality and the craftsmanship that goes into that. And I think it just means, I think it's just going to be one of those things where more and more of us, opportunities like a podcast like this, people like Dominic at every opportunity, and yourself, just talking more about why these things are good, to give the politicians more confidence around, and it's at two levels. Confidence around not being afraid to say, yes, I'm wearing a smart suit, a smart outfit, dress, whatever, and I'm proud of the fact that that is British and that's part of our soft power. But also understanding why these industries are so important to the UK economy.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not just always about the high-end stuff. I was at the Goodwood Revival. Fantastic event.
Great place. Yeah,
great British event.
I think it's the biggest vintage festival in the world.
Is it?
It's brilliant.
Marvellous.
And I met there the guys who own and run a company called Private Wire. They used to have a shop in Davis Street here in London.
Manchester.
Great products, make great coats. I bought a few things for them, and I just went on the stand to have a look at a jacket. Anyway, they were telling me they were really interested in actually supplying public service. You know, some of the military and they make that kind of quality product. They couldn't even work out how to engage with government and how to talk to the government about having a British producer produce these kind of high quality products for them. So I think that the other side of this is not just about high end, expensive stuff. It's just about promoting British quality products and the government putting things in place to support it, whether it's through procurement. It's obviously got to be cost effective, but the producers know that, so that's not such a challenge. Procurement has got to be cost effective, but also around whether it's the duty on shopping, whether it's business rates and how we do that for UK industry. But just giving that support and being seen to give public support and open support to good British craftsmanship that's part of our soft power and part of what creates employment in the UK in an industry and a skill set that AI can't replicate. So we do have an opportunity to have a unique position in the world with
There should be a sort of portfolio in government, do you think? Luxury minister.
Well, there probably is. They just don't do it right. And you know, the Prime Minister should drive around actually he probably drives around in a Range Rover, but he should be sponsored, you know, wearing great British clothes, as should all the government. And I think it's about, you know, I think we make a great mistake. We think that sort of aspiration and wanting to live a great life and having wonderful things around you is somehow snobbish, but it's not. It's actually human. It's what everyone wants. We want, and it doesn't have to be, as I say, expensive, as Brandon rightly said. And politics has gone through a sort of 30-year cycle post-Thatcher, where, you know, every politician has to be sort of down with the kids and pretending that they're not, you know, wanting to be in either a leader position or looking good or whatever it is. I think that's dented confidence in politics, and we should be ourselves, be authentic. I mean, I love my life and I like projecting it, but I still sometimes sort of think, should I be doing this? Am I being misconceived? The reality is I don't think I am. I think either of us are. So being authentic in who you are and aspiring to luxury and the principles of what Britain makes is actually a patriotic duty of politicians, not something that we should be adverse to. And Brandon touched on some things that you know, politics and the political establishment can do, which is, one, be proud of our luxury industry. It's gigantic, employs 500,000 people, and start thinking of creative ways to make it a success. You know, clusters, ateliers, apprenticeships and skills, how tax is used to promote the industry, because it'll all come back to us, because every single luxury export from, you know, the Premier League, Downton Abbey, private schools, luxury goods, Savile Row, Jermyn Street, whatever it is, it all comes back to people having a better view of Britain, and it makes Britain more of an aspirational principle in itself.
Quite right, and I think it also binds us together in a common culture as well.
Which is a very, very good point.
And
totally agree with you.
It's an old culture. You know, the image of how the world sees us is very much tied into this world. And well, with we three luxiteers taking on
Minister for Luxury, that's a great portfolio.
Well, next time
I want
bump into the charts.
I think I've got to be opposition spokesman for luxury, the luxury industry. I'm going to ask Kemi if she'll give me that role.
I think that's a great idea. Yes. And so, well, with that in mind, gents, thank you so much for coming down. I think we've made a dent in the issue at hand.
Pleasure being with Brandon, honestly.
Yes, so Lord Johnson and Sir Brandon, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much,
Absolutely.
Tom. Great to spend time with you.
I remain Tom Chamberlin, and this has been The Luxury Dispatch, the podcast that reveals how the world of luxury is shaped not only by taste and craftsmanship, but by influence, policy and power. My thanks to Lord Johnson and Sir Brandon for helping us navigate the intersection of government, global reputation, and the industries that so often define how a nation presents itself to the world. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, Please do like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We read every one. You can agree or disagree, challenge what you've heard, or suggest the vestiges of luxury you'd like us to step into next. Thank you for listening, and as ever, happy dressing, and God save the King.